If you smudge off the edge and still clear the fight, I'll gift a sub. You can probably tell that I'll only do that if I know that we're winning. Which we're not. Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. This time, we have some problems with extremes, but not the one you'd normally expect. We also just have some time-consuming duties. With that being said, for duty 1, we went to Praetorium as samurai. And yeah, as usual, not that much happens. The fanciest thing you can probably get up to as a samurai is trying to set up Higanbana on every clone, but because of how brief that phase is, it probably isn't worth it in most parties. A topic that briefly came up during this run was about the most effective way to farm PvP series XP. Nowadays, unless something wacky is going on, most of the time, the most time-efficient way is to simply do one frontline per day, since you'd need matches to resolve fast in crystalline conflict for that to be faster, which leads to something funky that happened in Season 1. Some players would queue into crystalline conflict, including ranked matches, since that tended to pop faster, and just AFK, since the resulting 4v5 tended to mean a quick loss. And yeah, turns out, deliberately losing is very fast, but also, mind you, very reportable. So, I reveal this dark magic to you to let you know that we have seen it before, and that it is magic you should avoid attempting. To keep with the MSQ roulette tradition, we've talked about Samurai as a Pokemon before, so let's instead talk about which Pokemon would be the best fit as the Samurai. Aesthetically, I imagine King Gambit is right on the nose. Other options could also be like Katana, which is right on the sword in a different way, or something like Chen Pao to reflect the all-out offense of the Samurai. And it does have the Sword of Ruin ability. I could also imagine Pokemon that like to use super strong moves with a drawback could be a good match to reflect this all-out behavior. What do you think? For duty 2, we went to throwing branches and stealing titles as Viper. Remember, every mob needs to be taken care of here, and Viper, strangely, is one of the jobs that are better positioned to do some AoE damage, so if the rest of the team isn't, it very well might not be, focusing on cleaving down the gobbles probably makes the most sense. For duty 3, we went to hostile clubs, and here all we can do is focus down the healthiest mob at all times. And for duty 4, we went to Ramuh Extreme as Dark Knight. Fortunately, we have Crusher on the healing and Ilana on the damage, so all three corners are covered. Unfortunately, I discover very quickly that my co-tank, that is max level by the way, has no clue what to do, yet it somehow works out anyway. I start off the pull by trying to approach at an angle since Ramuh's auto attacks are AoE. Unfortunately, our bard got impatient. The moment the orbs spawn, I go to grab 3, but we didn't put any markers down to pull 1, and my co-tank seems to also really want to be north, so we have to stand at a weird angle instead. There was also a bit in the starting section before the ads where it looked like the tank just started walking around aimlessly. Eventually, my buff duration goes so low that I'm expecting a tank switch, so I turn off my stance, which turned out to be necessary because guess who didn't provoke? Exactly on the second that my buff runs out, I use Shirk to make them tank with the buff they already produced. This also happens just as the ad phase begins, and I will now spend the rest of the run not trusting my co-tank because of this. Thankfully, Crusher and Ilana can manage the orb count. As we get into the ad phase, the tank also just starts vacuuming more orbs for no reason. Due to the difficulty of healing them at such a high orb count, they almost die, so they use Living Dead. Does not work on Ramuh, even with the buff, just so you know. And then Crusher saves them with Benediction. I conclude I have to take over tanking now before it gets any worse, and I simply hope that they will help me when it becomes time for that. As I fight ads, I check on Ramuh to make sure I still have aggro. With some deaths, we make it out of the ad phase, with my co-tank having maintained their overcharge, so for us to even stand a chance, I extend my buff once. At this point, I've also completely lost all hope in my co-tank and expect to use them as a sacrificial lamb to reset my buff later. Despite how catastrophic the Rolling Thunder got, it resolved easily once it latched on to Crusher. And moments before I hope my co-tank will finally reset their stacks, they instead extend them again to keep that overcharge going. Too many things happening at once, I conclude my best course of action is extending too. The next Rolling Thunder hits Ilana. As we continue to hold on with this party slowly falling apart, the moment I am one hit from dying, I shirk my co-tank to give myself the time I need to reset. If they live, great! If not, too bad, Lemao. If I didn't know better, they think it's like eating Ramuh and they need an orb every time they take the tank bust or something like that. Once I've stabilized, I take over tanking again to relieve the healers. I also make use of a potion to help a bit. That being said, I'm not sure what rate buff I'm waiting for sitting on MP as we approach the end. I realize I will have to extend again, right as Ilana swoops in and yoinks the orb right next to me. And now I can't make it. Thankfully, we have a tank that can hold Ramuh off for the last 1%, and we somehow succeed first try. Reminder that we have cleared this fight synced as 3 players total in the Extreme countdown. For GD5, we went to Castrum Meridianum as Scholar. Did you know that at level 46 to 53, Art of Wars are gained on 1? As in, it is better to use than ruin 1? Well, technically it is equal on 1, but you can auto-attack more and move better with the instant casts. And Scholar's auto-attacks, especially at this level and synced item level, is very useful, to the degree of being like a 10% damage boost on single target. Yes, 10%. At this level, the only reason you'd cast Ruin 1 is if you're not able to get into melee range. For GD6, we went to M10N, Arcadion's Extremes as Viper. This is actually a very interesting fight to optimize a bit on, even on normal. Viper's Uncoiled Fury and the entirety of the Reawaken combo both have AoE components to them, so the more you can plan to use them when the bros are close to each other, the more extra damage you can do. At the same time though, due to the amount of jumping around they do, holding a coil to use for that can also be extremely valuable, and using a Reawaken combo when they're moving a bunch may also help to avoid missing positionals, although, alternatively, you can also just preemptively use a True North if you suspect they will turn suddenly. A mechanic that tends to not really stand out much, but if ignored can actually cause a lot of problems, is the 4 tower soaks. Red Hot stomps the towers one at a time, and if a tower is missed entirely, then everyone takes quite heavy damage and gets a vuln stack. And it is very easy to go, meh, someone else will do it, only for the tower to explode. This can also be a convenient time to use Uncoiled Fury to keep uptime while covering for the rest of the raid if needed. We of course had no issues and cleared this one nice and quick. For GD7, we went to Clyteum as Black Mage. The first boss is pretty simple, but has a couple mechanics, one of which Black Mage is particularly effective at cheesing. The first one is Petrifying Beam, where the boss looks left and right and eventually settles on a direction. Don't bother moving until it decides on a side. That way, you can easily dodge slightly to the safe direction when you know. When the boss does it twice in a row, the second one will always strike the other side, so there you can move in advance. When it comes to Black Mage, knowing that the boss opens with this mechanic quite early, you kinda have to either send ley lines right out the gate to finish them before the first hit, or place the ley lines right under the boss when it goes to the edge, or where it will go to the edge, so you can stay in the circle while dodging. The other mechanic, the one Black Mage, among many other jobs, can cheese is Motion Scanner. A white scanner goes across the arena, and if you do anything, sometimes even if you don't do anything, Lemao, you get a vuln stack, get shoved into the air, and take heavy damage. However, the check is really weird, so if you dash through the scanner fast enough, it'll still give you the check mark for doing it correctly. The challenge is that the scanner is, I think, somewhere around 15 yalms wide, if not a little bit more, and so a lot of dashes only barely make it across, and targeted dashes may sometimes have trouble targeting someone on the other side. Not to mention, to get across fast enough, it has to be a straight line most of the time. Still, a pretty nifty trick for free uptime, and thanks to Between the Lines, a Black Mage could sacrifice some ley lines time to simply teleport to their own ley lines on the other side. The rest of the duty of course went about as you'd expect, with a pretty solid clear time. For duty 8, we went to Rathalos Extreme as Warrior. On the first try, we had a death in phase 1, and our Viper wasn't aware you're supposed to just respawn manually instead of waiting for a res, despite being told multiple times. When Garula came in, neither of the DPS mounted Rathalos, which somehow worked out because we bursted Garula so fast it didn't matter anyway. Going into phase 2, we had an unfortunate double death after the first down, and so we went over the mechanics that needed to be improved on before attempt 2. This time, Rathalos was correctly mounted and we had no deaths in phase 1. But instead, phase 2 started off immediately with the Reaper dying. Right after the first down, the Viper is targeted by the stack, and due to having lost HP from not getting an Ishuna in time, had too low HP for Crusher to Ishuna the burn away in time, and so the second death happens, before they even drink a potion. Right after, Crusher gets smacked by a turbo flyby, but miraculously does not get 1-2 punched. That poison places Crusher in lethal range again. Remember everybody, any removable debuff must be taken care of on Rathalos Extreme. Thankfully, Crusher was aware of the problem and used the potion in advance. Though Rathalos was knocked down before it became a problem, so we got the clear. For duty 9, we went to Titan Normal as White Mage. Quite an awkward level range White Mage, with Regen yes, but only Medica 1 for party healing, and Titan deals a surprising amount of party damage here. The fight is so short that 2-minute cooldowns are effectively 1 use though, so only 1 presence of mind, that we somehow got full value out of in the opener. And then Titan went to the gym, because duty 10 is Titan Extreme as Pectomancer. On the first pull, the tanks do not move Titan out to the edge, which leads to half the raid dying to the knockback, and we wipe out. Turns out, being an Alpha Legend does not mean that you're a master of tactics on an A Realm Reborn Extreme necessarily. On the second pull, both healers die twice before we even hit the third phase, which eventually leads to the whole party dying. By the way, this Extreme is so fast that it is actually a bit difficult to build Echo, since you have to survive 3 minutes for Echo to build. On the third pull, we made it to the final phase, but our Scholar ends up dying a ton, and suddenly, all of our Rezzers die in the same explosion. And Titan being at 1/3 HP simply is too much to beat with what remains. On the fourth pull, we have half the party dead before the phase 3 transition, and the whole party dead on the transition due to various AoE damage. I think these are one of those parties where the damage simply is overwhelming the double sprout healers, which is surprisingly common. Something similar happens on the fifth pull. My advice that I have given out before is that if you are queuing together with friends as sprouts for this kind of content, I'm not going to bonk you for queuing for the content the game allows you to queue for. What I am going to advise for you is to make sure you are not taking every seat in any role unless you are a full pre-made or close to. Leave a tank slot open for someone who might know better to help with the tanking. Leave a healer slot open for someone who might be stronger at healing to compensate if you're not as strong. Leave room for DPS to help too. Yes, mentors are, by the system itself, not necessarily expected to carry, but it is very likely they will be able to perform better, and you just might learn something. You also might not. For pull 6 then, out of nowhere, we make it all the way to the final phase with 0 deaths. And now that we can finally pay mind to something else for a change, it seems the tanks have no idea what to do with the ads. And then we have trouble with the jails not being separated, so they need extra attention. But we somehow manage with only 1 healer dying. The phase is also dragging on to a degree where a tank switch would be smart, which effectively happens naturally as the Dark Knight goes down, but the warrior doesn't even register it and just lets Titan face the entire raid. Thankfully, we clear with a melee LB before it becomes a problem. Yikes. And finally for duty 11, we went to Sastasha as Sage, with 3 classes, with HP that could totally mean that 1 or more of them are truly first-timers. The team decides to do the dungeon very slowly, 1 pack at a time. Easy for me, I guess. As we take our time, we also have a chance to see certain mechanics. For instance, I explain how to tell which coral is the correct one, the parchment at the start of the duty. We also get to see the jerk anglerfish use its raid buff, and because of this pace, we just chill through the whole thing. We even explore some side rooms. This also leads to a brief conversation about being considerate in the stream chat. On the one hand, doing the dungeon the most efficient and speedy way is considerate in not wasting other people's time. On the other hand, if rushing means the party doesn't have fun or learn anything from it, and the only one desiring to rush to begin with being the person who is doing it, they might effectively be wasting everyone else's time by making them unable to enjoy the duty. I know that sounds a bit ridiculous, but I do think it is an interesting discussion, since if you have 3 first-timers that want to chill and explore the duty, surely the most considerate approach is to let them do that, rather than force a speedy run because player 4 wants it that way. You get what I mean? From the mentor perspective, this duty took about as long as a max level dungeon. In fact, it took about as long as the entirety of the Titan Extreme run just before. So I had no reason to complain. I had a nice chill time. I hope the Sprouts had a good time too. Unfortunately, we only got 11 duties this time, but at least some interesting ones filled in. This means we have now passed 29 35ths on the achievement. Oh boy! Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Twitch or Ko-Fi. Links in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact! Every combat job and class in 14 can solo Sastasha synced. Most can even do it minimum item level. A lot of it comes down to kiting, but in the case of Monk, it comes down to also a lot of potions, I think. But it can be done. Some jobs, notably ones with infinite instant attacks like White Mage or ranged physicals, can do it while taking no or almost no damage. Also, we may never know if a non-combat job can do it because they cannot even enter the duty to begin with.